started. We have a couple of new faces, but that is not yet on the agenda. So first item on the agenda is public comment. So is there anybody from the public who wishes to make a comment to the board? It does not appear so. So moving on, so the next item is attendance. So we have, I just want to acknowledge some new faces. So first of all, Eileen McMorrow, who was our representative from the Office of Higher Education, retired Thursday. So we didn't have a chance to say goodbye to her. But she's been a wonderful resource for us all. And so I know that Dwani was identified as joining us as the new interim representative. Dwani, are you here, and can you briefly introduce yourself, your name, your title, and a sentence or two about what you do at OEC?
Sure. Yeah. I know many faces over here. So hello. I am Dwani Pandya, and I am the IT director, or the new title is Customer Success Manager for the Office of Early Childhood. And I had been working very closely with Eileen, so I am pretty familiar with what the P20 win is about, and its goals and everything else. So I'm happy to be over here. Thank you, Katie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome. And then we have new representatives from the Department of Correction as well. So we have Jason and Ron joining us. And if in whatever order you choose, if you want to say your name, your title, and a couple of sentences about what you do.
Good morning. My name is Ron Cotta. I am the Chief of Staff for the Connecticut Department of Correction. I oversee our data unit for the agency.
Awesome. Welcome.
Morning. Jason Goddard, I'm supervisor in the data unit.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome. We're happy to have you here. So as we transition into attendance, if you could just say your name, your title, and the agency that you are with. I will start with Ram.
Rama Basturia, Office of Higher Ed, COO. Thanks.
Bob.
Bob Berry, database lead in BITS.
Joe.
Joe Campbell, Educational Technology Consultant, the Connecticut Career and Technical High School System.
Patrick.
Patrick Flaherty, Director of Research at the Connecticut Department of Labor. We're the state's labor market information shop and the data integration hub for P20 WIN.
Scott.
Scott Gall, Chief Data Officer, State of Connecticut, Office of Policy and Management, working with Katie Coral, our wonderful colleagues who work on P20 WIN.
Michael.
Michael Gerlamo, Chief Quality and Data Officer for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services.
Ajit. Not yet here. Lauren.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Jorgensen, the Director of Institutional Research at UConn.
Rose.
Rose Kelly, Interim Director, HMIS and Strategic Analysis for CCEH.
Jan.
Hi, Connecticut State Colleges and Universities, Senior Associate and Data Privacy Officer.
Fred.
Hi, Department of Children and Families. Fred North, Director of Data Reporting and Evaluation.
Maura.
Morning, Maura Poultry-Preventure. I'm Vice President of Research with the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges.
Susan.
Good morning, Susan Smith, Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics, Department of Social Services.
Brian.
Morning, Brian Sperry, Deputy Director of Information Technology at Judicial Branches Court Support Services Division.
And Grace. Okay, great, awesome, and we have a quorum. So thanks, everybody. Welcome to our new members. We are ever growing. So before we get into the first item, which is the data security updates, I just wanted to provide a quick legislative update. So you may have seen the email that I sent you all yesterday about the legislation that's been introduced this session that could impact P20 win. So there's a House Bill 5213, an act concerning disconnected use, that appears to be building on the VCG request last year of the same name about disconnected use in Connecticut. There's actually a specific provision about strengthening P20 win, which is something we're already working on. But it's really exciting to see so many people acknowledge the work being done through P20 win, recognizing that we could do so much more. And so it's pretty exciting. I included some sample testimony in that email that specifically references P20 win. So very exciting to see this happen. And then the second is Senate Bill 256, which is an act concerning data and many other things. It's similar to a bill that was introduced last session that makes some technical changes, but importantly, it includes language that would ensure that any request for public records and FOI request for data pertaining to an approved data request must be made to the originating data source. And so this has been a topic of discussion for this group and the executive board for a while now. So OPM will be testifying in support of that bill on Monday. So that's a really quick update. Are there any questions? Brian Sperry.
Good morning, Katie. I was just curious if you've heard of any kind of friction or opposition to that proposed bill.
Not yet. I haven't. I was going to check later today to see what sort of testimony has been submitted in support or opposition to the bill. But so far, no. It didn't. It passed out of committee last session, but an amendment was tacked on that prevented it from moving forward.
Okay.
So it wasn't like direct opposition to the language. There were other political issues that were attached to it.
All right. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Of course. Are there any other questions? Comments? None. Okay. So you may remember, like moving on to the data security updates, you may remember that we have been working with Baron Rodriguez at DISC on the security improvements that we plan to make, or that we hope to make to P20 win. We had a security assessment done with BITS and DOL and OPM. We just want to really thank DOL and BITS for participating and bringing so many people to the table to discuss the security operations and technology that is used to make P20 win functional. And then for all of our data governing board members who took time out of their day to meet with Baron to discuss P20 win. We really appreciate all of your help and support and participation in this process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Baron, who's going to give us a quick update.
Okay, thank you. And Scott, just to confirm, Scott and Katie confirmed that we're going to go through the deck that we discussed yesterday. Okay. All right, let me share my screen.
Oh, all said, we appreciate Baron doing this because he's 3 hours behind us currently.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay? Thumbs up. Awesome.
Yep.
All right. So for those of you I didn't meet, I see many of the friendly faces that were part of this process. So thank you again. I want to reiterate those thanks for taking time to talk to me. I'm Baron Rodriguez. I'm the Executive Director of the Data Integration Support Center at WestEd. And this actually is our first enhanced security review. So I want to thank the state of Connecticut also for working with us as we roll this program out to other states that are seeking some of the same reviews. So overall, as a reminder, or for those who don't know what this is about, this is really to go beyond your typical pen test or security assessment that is usually required by most state government agencies, to really focus on the nuances of integrating data, as well as the privacy components that sometimes are not part of those standard reviews. Our focus areas were really focused. We really spent a lot of time on, the data matching process, data sharing process, and to review and update the legal and access review frameworks on current data matching processes and software, and really to look at some of the modern areas to modernize the system, but still allow technology to. Sorry, I have to move a little bit. It got loud, and I apologize. The dangers of being in public areas. To focus really on the transparency of access and really solidify the government's roles for those to participate in the P21. So let's get right into the overall findings. One of the things that we really noticed as we were working on this is that the amount of data movement with the current process does really enhance the risk associated with the movement of data. And part of that is because a lot of the movement is really not able to be tracked or audited. And so sometimes you don't know necessarily where that data is or where it goes. And so that does put a level of risk on the data in various stages of the process. We're also concerned about just the staffing level and the level of effort as it relates to, putting together the pieces of doing the linkage, but also the overall effort that the partner agencies have in the process. And sometimes, for instance, the data will sit for quite a while before the data is attended to. But the one thing we did see consistently that many of the governing board members and OPM and the Department of Labor are really committed to a secure, transparent data process. So there's a lot of support for really making sure the system is secure and doing some good work for the state of Connecticut. I think the other piece is that overall, from a technological standpoint, the maturity of the technical landscape has gotten such that there's just a lot of options to really get the P20 win system efficient and add a level of security by utilizing some of the cloud-based tools that are available. And DISC plans to work with the P20 win and the governing board and the team to really develop some short, medium, and long-term plans to modernize and further secure the system. I'm going to go into more specifics here. One of the areas that I want to focus on is the data movement, because I think that's really one of the key pieces that really becomes hard to track. Part of one of the areas that is really critical is making sure that there's a classification process that, as the data is being moved or being stored, that the data is classified as confidential if it is, as potentially confidential. If the data can be re-identified by complementary linkage, or it's not properly de-identified. There are points where you have to do that as part of the process, but it needs to be classified that way by the agencies that are contributing, but also by OPM, so that there's a good idea of where that data is and what kind of protections need to be in place, such as access controls. The other piece that was kind of a big area of this, it was really difficult to validate whether or not the data destruction was being conducted in a timely manner. And the data use agreements and data destruction certifications need a way to be able to validate. There needs to be a way to validate that the terms of the data sharing agreements and the data use agreements are being complied with. We were unable to validate that. So we believe that part of that is just the overall design of the system. You want to have that automated instead of a manual process. It's really a big burden to track that and keep a paper log or a written log of whether or not the data is being handled correctly. So we think as the P20 Win system moves forward, moving to the modern security controls and transitioning away from a federated system would be in the best interest of the state of Connecticut and of the partner agencies. When we were looking at the audit process, the logging of the matching process, it was really difficult to specifically assess whether or not there has been movement of data. I think that that's also evidenced by the tabletop exercise that was done. So we really think that the data integration hub and partner agencies need to implement data logging and audit in the current movement, and that there are best practice. There are specific framework requirements such as 90-day retention. We recommend 365 days for retention of those logs, just so sometimes you don't know that data has been moved without approval. And this allows you to go back at least a year and check and see if that happened. I actually worked with a state agency that's currently in that process. They believe that some data was inappropriately shared, and so they had to go back and look, and were able to affirm it's about 240 days that the data had been accessed and pulled. Right now, that wouldn't really be possible to do in the current configuration. In the current structure, even if you were to stay in the current structure, this would become an arduous system to be compliant with really the requirements of being able to ensure that the partner agencies also have this adequate security controls as that data moves. In the current NIST requirements or any of the frameworks, you would be required to ensure the system security of all 16 agencies that may touch the data. And we were unable to see that there were system security plans that kind of articulate how each of those agencies handle their security, how they encrypt their devices. So the movement, of data really requires that. And, this really isn't sustainable from our perspective. So a centralized model with access controls and the ability to have a level of persistence to linkages of the data really gives a different level of security, but also utility to the P20 Win going forward. We talked about this, but this is just a little more specificity on the over-reliance on manual processes. Obviously, this is a sustainability issue, but it also becomes a training security risk. And then, of course, there's also just a resource drain to do this. And when I was interviewing the various partner agencies, that was pretty consistent. There were quite a bit of concerns about being able to sustain this, especially if more requests were to start coming in, it would become a very unsustainable model. And, we don't want people to potentially lose faith in the good work that's being done here, because the research request process takes so long, or it really puts a burden on agencies. So again, utilizing a more modern matching and linkage process would alleviate some of that. Speaking of the partner agencies, I think we're summarizing the conversations, but there has been discussions about the ability to control the release of data in the current structure. And I think, or even if the structure were to change, technology and systems today really do have design elements that allow the partner agencies to be able to, for instance, review the data before it goes out, ensure the proper level of disclosure avoidance has been applied, and then simply check a box and say, yep, I've reviewed this. This is good to be released. And so if that's a concern by partner agencies, that's certainly very possible where many IDSs and state longitudinal data systems where their designs are actually that way so that their partner agencies can review the data, make sure it meets their requirements and meets their regulatory requirements before that data gets released to a researcher. We talked about the movement. I think the other area is really related to the obviously over-reliance on manual processes. I think there are some agencies that are concerned about use of a secure enclave or the persistence of data. And they point to the legal requirements associated with that change. But there are so many states that are currently doing that right now. DISC would be more than happy to review and help with the MOU and the data sharing agreements that would be necessary to be able to support that model from a legal perspective. So I think it's really something that we can work through. So the other area I want to bring up is that there was some confusion about the process and how it works, and that it's not really very transparent. And I don't mean that anybody's trying to hide anything. I don't want to indicate that, but because the process is very complicated, there were questions on, how good is the quality of the data? Are we linking the right data sources? And it would be it would behoove the P20 win to focus on providing some more transparency to that process. But I really think it would be much easier through the modernization process because the current one is fairly complicated. I think that the data breach response exercise or even the tabletop exercise that you did was great. There are agencies that said we need to do this more often, which I think is, really speaks to the partner agencies wanting to have a secure system. So I applaud that first of all, and even applaud, give a second round of applause to the agencies for saying we want more of this, because I think they think by doing it more often, it becomes part of your muscle memory, and you're able to respond and make the right steps. There are a lot of wrong steps you can do in a data breach, and so I think that's a really good thing that Connecticut is considering. We talked about the third bullet. I just also want to acknowledge that although the findings might seem like, oh wow, this is a lot to digest, this is concerning if you're thinking that. What's really important here is I think agencies are really excited about the potential to expand the different data that could be used and include other agencies to really meet their policy and program evaluation needs. So, there's a lot of good energy around continuing to support this effort. So, oops, sorry, go back one. One of the things that we're really recommending for as you modernize your P20 win system is it can become very easy for agencies or people who are concerned about the system to start to come up with scenarios of inappropriate data use. And one of the ways to combat that is to ensure that you actually articulate the system use cases. What are we going to use it for? Is it going to be for researchers? Is it going to be for partner agencies? Give some examples of what those use cases are, and really design and modernize the system to support those cases. That becomes very important and critical as policymakers or others on the governing board are articulating what the system is and what the system isn't. So there are sites that can help you with that. I know you work with Chloe Chatis and the state support team. She certainly is an excellent resource to help with that as well. But one of those things that we strongly recommend. And you can see many of your partner states around the country have really moved to that model. This is what the system is. This is what the system isn't, right? From the research perspective, we talked to several researchers as part of our review process. They're very excited of the idea of like centralized tools available for them to just be able to use within the environment and not necessarily, have to bring their own tools. They talked about potentials for dashboard, availability for more data. So there was a lot of excitement around that. They did suggest that data collecting and definitions will need to be a critical part of system design. So as you start to link together various sets of data and include other agencies, just ensuring that you're thinking about that as part of the process. One of the examples that was given by one of the criminal justice agencies was laws change over a period of time, for instance. So data that may seem the same may be different depending on what is legal and what isn't over a period of time. So if you're looking, for instance, at arrest data, you would want to make sure that you have, metadata that explains that as part of the research request process. Speaking of the criminal justice and social service agencies, they uniformly said that it's critical to have a chain of custody and auditability for their full participation in the P20 win. So the current configuration does limit that based on our findings. So this is something that will continue to allow those agencies to participate while focusing on modernization. So again, going back to the MOU and the participation agreement, I think that working through that in 2024 for consistency with any new processes and references to the data integration hub, making sure that that's very clear to all partners is critical. So I know that the OPM folks are committed to doing that, but just really kind of articulating those and making sure the governing board really feels comfortable with any changes to the architecture over time, and then reflecting that in the participation in it. The other piece is that the participating agencies also should have incident response plans. And if you don't have them, it's really important that you get them in place so that the P20 win can align their incident response plan with yours. It's just planning for those scenarios. But when we talked to some of the partner agencies, some of them did not or weren't aware of incident response plans that their agencies have. So we highly recommend that be something the partner agencies work to either find or get in place, which will then in turn help the OPM team move forward with their incident response plans. So the next steps, this was a draft and a high level overview. We're going to have a very detailed down really into the weeds and the specific controls of the framework provided to the OPM team on the 26th of March. And then from there, we will work with OPM and work on drafting a mock-up of a modernized cloud-based integrated data system about beginning to mid-April, so that the system can start focusing on procuring and moving in that direction with their SLDS. So with that, Scott and team, I'm going to hand it back to you and see if there are any questions.
We'll unmute. So if there are questions, now is a great time to discuss. We have Baron here. I'll reiterate two things. One, what Katie said earlier, just the thanks to everybody who put time into this, both the DISC team, particularly Department of Labor, and BITS, who put a lot of time in. From the BITS side, we had dozens of people sort of called into interviews on short notice to go through this for the assessment. The other thing, so I'll ask a question if nobody else raises their hand in the next 30 seconds or so, but one, just a reminder for people. So this is an assessment that we asked for. We wanted DISC to come in and do this to give a security assessment, to have that as part of a planning exercise. This is really the first step in the process. So it's to kind of assess the current landscape, the way things have been done to date, understand where there's some gaps in the system. We've had, again, a series of kind of incidents over the past year. We really have to take those seriously, and I think we have kind of the best in the business here helping us give an assessment of the system, put it in the context of what we can do to modernize and have a more secure system that delivers high quality data safely and securely to the recipients. So again, we brought this in. There's a lot of feedback, recommendations. I think there's a lot of changes that this is pointing us to look closely at. But again, this is something that we're really, I think from our side, from the OPM, the DOL, the BITS, the folks that put a lot of time into this assessment are hopefully very open to taking seriously the recommendations and the points from the assessment. Grace, you have a hand up. Sorry, I'll stop talking.
I just wanted to confirm that this won't have any implications on the research that's currently going on. It's more of a forward-thinking exercise as opposed to what's happening currently.
Yeah, and Baron,
thank you.
Do you want to bring the, or you could talk through or bring up the slide with the timeline? So again, this is, I think, the first step. This is probably a few months long process to go through, carry out the assessment, come up with some preliminary findings, recommendations, share that back with the data governing board, make sure people have time to digest it. We'll send the slides afterwards. It's dense. If you have feedback or questions about something, there's time to provide that. Then we'll start to make, further recommendations and pull together a plan sometime later this spring. But this is first step in a process so that you have transparency and understanding of where the recommendations are coming from, a chance to, ask questions, have back and forth, change something if we missed something. Baron talked to a lot of people, but did not talk to everybody about everything. So. Jan, sorry.
Thanks, no problem. All right, this is great to see. And I trust DISC's perspective in their work in this, and I look forward to seeing how the system will modernize. I do have a couple questions. One is, these are recommendations, right? And it's an awful lot, like you said, a lot of material and more detailed report is coming out. So to what degree is the expectation that we will be accepting and adopting all of these recommendations wholesale, or, versus is there wiggle room within that? That's question number one. Then after that, I have a second follow-up.
I'm going to kind of defer to Baron. Let's see.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are recommendations. I think some of them, Jan, are pretty important. The data movement piece is a pretty big risk. And so that would be one I would highly recommend gets addressed as part of the modernization effort. That's, the tabletop exercise really proved that's a big issue. And I think part of the modernization piece is to the linkage piece and making sure that part is auditable, needs to be handled in the near future. Part of that may involve, I know that the Department of Labor is looking at a new linkage tool along with OPM, so that might be part of that process. But I would say that for the most part, those are very critical to address, because it really, those weren't very clear that information has been or will be protected because of the data. And I think that's why, we strongly recommend that. We're here to provide the recommendations to the state of Connecticut. We're not, the the federal government auditing you, right, and saying you're doing something, so you must. But with this information, you know, OPM, the governance team, needs to decide, you know, what areas you really need to focus on, and especially considering they've got other agencies that are considering participating with this, it might make it less desirable to be part of the P20.
So you're kind of rolling into my second question, I think, because you're focusing in on the data movement and the risk there. And there's many places where data moves. So I'm not exactly sure which area of that you're honing in on. So that kind of gets to the nature of the system. And I'll just do a comparison to the Coleridge ADRF, I don't know what you call it, initiative, and where you have an environment, a protective enclave environment, where there's a project and people put the data in for the project and it stays there for the whole time. It's linked, it's used, it's manipulated. The final data products are there. The final data products are approved in that environment. They're not really moving around until the very end, and then things come out for that project. And if there's another project, data put their data in, and it's the same thing. Versus, are you thinking that all agencies will be putting data in every year, every quarter, every what, and it stays there and is used within the environment on an ongoing basis? So I'm wondering what your vision is.
Jan, there are several options within there. You know, and it really depends on, remember when I talked about the use cases, how, you know, what would be best and most efficient for the P20 win. Within there are options to keep only a persistent linkage. That's pretty normal for longitudinal analysis. So there would be persistence of the linkage, but not necessarily persistence of the data linked in one spot. Does that make sense? So you still would have the linkage, and then you would call upon those linkages depending on the research request. And then that data would be pulled for those specifics. So there's states that are using that model, but there are those that are keeping the linked persistent data, or creating data sets, and then completely de-identifying them for research purposes, right? And keeping that in persistence. But for recordation or to be able to replicate, they do keep the persistence of the linkage in that case as well.
This is the point that I think
So
really, yeah, and I think this is the point where we really need to have a lot of discussion and individual agency input into this particular point. So and it goes back to, I think, these are big changes. So we already have a P20 win system kind of with a way of working, and I understand it's grown a lot. There are lots of changes and things that need to be improved. I understand that, and I'm on board with that. But in terms of the work that we already have, the data sharing agreements are already in place, like Grace brought up, because it's going to be a while before we have something new, agreement on what that is, new processes in place, new governance in place where everybody, you know, can buy into that. That's not a short-term thing. And so I want to make sure that the existing agreements can continue to operate, just echoing Grace's thought, as they are. If you have something that's already signed, we can keep moving within our current system. That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jan, that was one thing when I was talking to Scott, I said one of the things we don't want to do at DISC is stop the work that's happening. That's not our goal. We do want to, you know, raise the flag to things that we believe are concerning and create risk with either the configuration process or the legal agreements, right? So that's all part of our review process. And so, you know, it is up to the state what level of risk they're willing to assume. There's always risk in any kind of, just to be clear on that. I'm not, you know, there's risk in everything we do with data every day. So what level of risk the governing group and OPM are willing to take, that's really up to them. But we were just pointing out the areas that that probably need to be addressed in short order. So that's why we talk about a short, medium, and long-term plan. There are some that I think we might want to address sooner, and then the others could be over a period of time, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Last thought. Agency control over their processes continues to be important. That's not a question. I'm not asking for a response, just sort of stating a fact for us.
I think though, Jan, I do want to respond to that because I think that I think the new model, and I talked about it during the presentation. I think the new model does allow, in fact, I think it allows a greater level of control because you know, if you build that process where, okay, let's say you have the persistent linkage, right? And they want some data from your organization. You still would have the ability to go and review the data before. Here's the final set. Let's say they do all the linkage for you and put it together before it goes to a researcher. You still get the opportunity to review it before release. So I think it gives you just as much control, if not more, because that data right there. And if you want to see if that data has been used, they're supposed to be tracking the movement of data and use of data as being that centralized provider. So I think it's still there for you. I think it'll be, we do
It
need to
depends.
change the
It depends
MOUs.
thinking about how we're just structured, a persistent linkage into what? All of our data source systems. So we're going too far in the weeds. I really appreciate this dialogue and the opportunity to have it. Thank you so much.
And we can talk more, Jen.
Okay.
Offline. So no problem.
Okay.
Are there any more questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much, Baron. I know it's very early where you are. We really appreciate you taking the time to go over this with us. And we look forward to continuing our work with you. So in the last 15 minutes, we have two, but probably just one item that we want to vote on. So I'm gonna, in a moment, turn it over to Coral. But last year, the governing board approved a data security policy and process. In the last year, we've had a data security working group discussing how to better assess the security of agencies and researchers who would be requesting data. And so recommendations came out of that working group, and they have been integrated into the policy and process documents that were included in your board packet. And I'm going to, I guess, before we get into discussion, is there a motion and a second to approve this? And then we will discuss the changes.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. Motion made by Patrick, seconded by Ram, or the other way around, actually. And then, so Coral, are you ready to go over that?
So as Katie mentioned, we had the working group. We discussed their recommendations either in the last data governing board meeting or the one before that, I'm not sure. One of the biggest changes that they recommended was including both the questionnaire as an option for data requesters as well as the data security plan. So also in your packet, you received a draft of data security plan guidelines. These are referenced in the new process. I'll pull that up first. We wanted to make these just to ensure that the requirements for the data security plan are the same requirements for the data security questionnaire. So this is the security plan guidelines. It goes over that if a data requester is submitting a data security plan, what they must cover, and then they also have a list of questions. These are the same exact questions that are on the OnSpring questionnaire if they were to go that route. So if they do questionnaire or they do plan, they're still required to address the same information and are given the same set of questions, just to ensure that those two different paths align and you're getting the same information from data requesters. So moving on to the process document, we did remove the definition of a questionnaire library since it doesn't really align with the way OnSpring works. So I removed that from definitions. We added a definition for the data security plan, which is pretty identical to the definition of the data security questionnaire. In implementation, a lot of the changes are just references to there's now a questionnaire or a plan or a questionnaire and a plan. And then we also added in language that references those data security guidelines so that, the data governing board will develop and regularly review and update a set of data security guidelines to use in the data sharing process. as well as guidelines that will be published to the P21 website. We also, in step 2, a data requester must complete a data security questionnaire or submit a data security plan that covers what's established in the data security guidelines. And another, that we all store both the data security questionnaire and the data security plans at OPM, and then they'll be included in any data request materials that are sent out to the participating agencies related to that request. A change that is a little bit different is that, so if a participating agency receives a data request and they do not confirm that the request meets their data security standards, so they've denied the request because of either the questionnaire responses or the plan provided, the participating agency does have to provide a written response as to why the requester's responses were not adequate, as well as provide a recommendation for changes to make in order to meet the requirements, so that a requester can go back, they can update their system or update their plan and their questionnaire and then resubmit, and they'll actually, just to ensure that they have the information on how they can get from a no to a yes. That's also included down here in step 6. So data requesters will be notified of why they did not meet the requirements, and then provided that written feedback from agencies that said they didn't meet the requirements. And those are most of the changes. We also added attachments for the working group memo and those data security plan guidelines. And then in the policy document, nothing really needed to be added other than including those additional, the working group memo document. I will pass it back to Katie.
Thanks, Coral. This is super helpful. And just a reminder that the source of these, the source of these changes come directly from the recommendations made by the Data Security Working Group that many of our participating agencies here were a part of. So it reflects that. Are there any? So moving on to discussion, are there any questions or comments about this?
I have a question. I understand Peter was on the team. That's great. And I know I'm familiar with this recommendation. But has he seen this language as it was drafted?
We have not sent the working group the updated plan, but we did send them their memo that they wrote, where they referenced that they recommended there be a plan and guidelines, and that agencies provide written reasoning as to why.
Okay. Thanks for that information.
Right. So the memo, the recommendations from the working group informed the language in these documents. Any further thoughts or questions? Comments? Concerns? Okay. With that, unless somebody wants to call for a roll call vote, I think we could do a voice vote, unless somebody opposes this.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to oppose because we need to actually review the language on my team, and they haven't had a chance to do that. I'm very sorry, but we need to take that step.
Hey, Jan, just raising my hand and unmuting. But I think in this case, so Peter, some of the other CISOs were on a working group that is making recommendations to the data governing board. So he saw all the products of the working group. If you want him to review them, that's sort of your responsibility on the data governing board to ensure that that's happening. So
right, exactly. And I've reached out to him and am looking for his input, but I don't have it yet.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you have a time frame when you get his input?
We have a meeting next Wednesday of the tall agenda. It would be great if he could give me a response after that. I can't guarantee it though. He walks underwater with the amount of things he has on his plate, but I will move it as quickly as I can. I do understand. Thanks.
Yeah, I totally understand. I think that everybody in that kind of role is busy. It helps us to plan whether we're putting it on the agenda. If you know that there's an issue like that, to apprise us of it beforehand, and then we can figure out, okay, we don't need to call it for a vote.
Right. It only came up like Monday, so we just haven't had enough time to work through the process, but
So
I do
we
understand.
we did bring up that we were going to bring the policy up, and that the notices went out a week beforehand, which is what the bylaws require.
Ron?
Yeah, Katie, thank you. I just had a quick question. How long have we been trying to finalize this? Just for in general?
So we've been working with the working group for almost a year, and we've been bringing updates from the working group at nearly every data governing board meeting. This is the first time that we have brought the amended policy and process to a vote.
So to that point, you know, because like I said, I know everyone's times, our schedules are very, very tight, and we want to be able to move forward. And I understand and appreciate that Peter may not have had the opportunity to review that. Is there any way that we can connect with Peter, in order to be able to see if for the next board meeting he can have that review, and then we can move forward, on a vote? I don't know, and maybe that's a rhetorical question, but I really believe, my time is very tight, and I know everyone is having the same scenarios, I'm assuming. And, I just don't, and I've said this in the past, I just don't want to continue having these conversations months and months down the line.
Okay, so I'm meeting with Peter next week. This draft only came out on Monday. It's
It was
new.
part of the board packet that I
Yeah,
sent on
but
Friday.
yeah, but it's new. Okay, so we'll move it as quickly as we can. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Our process is to have our team review these things before we finalize them, and we just haven't had a chance to get the feedback, but we'll do it as quickly as we can, Rom. I do understand.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm for me, it's just for scheduling purposes, and I know that he has to review it, and that's great. And for me, it would be very helpful that, if he reviews it, if we can know, hey, by 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whatever time period, at least we know that he'll be able to review it if he has any concerns. And then at that point, we can move forward and vote. That's all I'm trying to address.
How about we vote on the other one in the last 5 minutes? How about that?
I'm not the chair. I'm just voicing my concerns on this one issue. So.
Well, we have this motion open, so we either vote on it or table it until the next meeting.
Well, it has to be unanimous, right? So I would probably say move to table.
Okay.
If you need a second, you get it from, if you need a second, you got it.
Second.
Brian, you said you seconded it?
I'll take that second.
Okay. All right, so we have a movement to table from Rom, seconded by Brian. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so this is tabled. We have an updated pre-publication review that was also shared out last Friday in the board packet. I am loath to ask for a motion on this, but is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion? Well, motion made by Patrick. Who seconded it?
Use Bob.
Okay, great. Any discussion?
I think it's great. Thank you for making thank you for everybody that provided feedback and making the edits. So.
Okay. Again, so is this something we can do by voice vote, or do I need to do a roll call?
We do by voice.
Okay,
Voice.
so the motion on the table is to approve the pre-publication review policy and process document. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, it passes. Thank you all for your work on this. It's very exciting. We appreciate it. Ram.
No, I apologize. I hit the wrong button. I was gonna
Oh.
clap.
Oh, okay. Great. So this is wonderful. Thank you all. In the remaining 2 minutes, the next item that we had on the agenda is data requests. So I will very quickly share that the data sharing agreement for the education and workforce training pathways has been shared and is circulated out for signature. So hopefully we will get those in the next week. And the data sharing agreement for the Roberta Willis evaluation has also been circulated for signature. We have a data sharing agreement in development for the Broca Young Mothers Program evaluation that we hope to send out in the next week or two. So we're making really good progress with data requests, and yeah, that is all I have to say on that for right now. If there are any final thoughts, comments, we have 1 minute left. Scott.
Katie, you have updates on the site visit to share.
Oh, right. Yes. Thank you. So in the remaining minute, the site visit has been rescheduled to Tuesday, June 11th. I will start sending out updated invitations to those sessions for that day with the Federal Department of Education. So thank you all for your patience as we have to reschedule that due to the snowstorm. But making progress. Okay, thank you for that. And with that, it is 9:30. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Have a great day.
Great, thank you.
You too.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.